Welcome to another edition of A Voice on Main Street. I'm Gary Sutton, and I have a voice on Main Street every day on WOYK Radio. You can find us at 989WOYK.com, where you can tune in every day at 98.9 FM or 1350 AM WOYK. And we're so glad to be joining people every day who have a voice on Main Street. But I like to get to the essence of what people are all about, what they're doing, what makes them special on Main Street, because we all have a special story to tell, and none more special than my guest here today, Warren Goodling, who's been a good friend for a long time, a fellow coach in basketball for a long time, but more importantly, he has a unique story to tell about being a player too, and being a guy who has fallen in love with the game for a lifetime. And Warren, great to have you on the show today.
Yeah, nice to be here, Gary.
Always a pleasure to have you aboard, my friend. And a lot of people don't know this, and you and I have been friends for a lot of years, but you and I tell this story all the time. I don't know if you ever remembered this game as much as I did, but we coached our first game we ever coached in basketball against each other back in, I think, 1974. Does that sound right?
It's actually 1975, early January.
Early January.
74, 75 season.
So you do remember?
I do remember, yes.
You won the game. It was 23, I think, to 17. It was a high-scoring affair back in 7th and 8th grade days.
Yeah.
But what was interesting, I think my dad had hired you, and then you coached against me in the first game. So, but my dad's – I remember I talked to my dad about it later on, and I said, what do you like about this guy? And he said – and I was talking about you. And he said he was enthusiastic. He said he could talk to people. He loved kids. And he was a good educator. He said that's why I hired him. It was one of the 4 things that he had down that he liked about you. And to this day, every one of them has come true that I've seen over the years. But great to have you aboard this morning. So where'd this love affair with basketball get started for you?
Well, I think the big influence was my brother Roger, who was older than me, and he played at York High, and he played at Lock Haven. And then he coached at Camp Curtin Junior High in Harrisburg, right, and coached at William Penn in Harrisburg during my days of elementary school and junior high and even high school. So I became a big fan of Camp Curtin and Harrisburg William Penn, went to a lot of those games when I had a chance to go. And I think that really spurred me on to work on basketball and enjoy the game. Your
brother became quite an icon in the area for a lot of people, and a lot of us used to watch Roger coach, and he was an outstanding coach, outstanding player as well, but an outstanding coach there, especially at Shippensburg, where a lot of us got a chance to see it. But you mentioned William Penn of Harrisburg. Boy, that comes out of the old days, the old Central Penn League. William Penn of Harrisburg. You had John Harris. You had, it wasn't like it is today. But going back to those times, so you watch Roger coach, and you say, well, okay, I want to play basketball. So you have a story about your dad, and you were going to go out and put a hoop up in the garage or up in the driveway like so many people do, and your dad said, Tell us about that.
Well, when I was in 6th grade, my friend, Don Riekert, got me we would exchange Christmas gifts, so he got me a basketball rim.
Okay.
So I have this basketball rim at the house. I hold it up. I say, hey, Dad, what about this basketball rim? He goes, not putting it up. I said, what? He goes, I'm not putting it up. He says, you want to learn basketball, you need to go down to Shelley Park. And to this day, I'll give him a lot of credit for holding firm and not putting that basketball rim up.
Shelley Park became one of those places that you gathered in York County if you wanted to play basketball. Has become almost legendary this day. It still sits there. I don't think people use it the way they once did. But I remember when I was a kid growing up, and I was never as good as you are, never even close, not even in the same conversation. But I remember people would say, Shelley Park. It was almost in awe. You wanted to go get a game, you went to Shelley Park to play, right?
Yeah, when I was young, I would go to Shelley Park, and I would like to get there before everybody got there so I could get some shots up. Because when the real players got there, like Eddie King and Barry King and Kenny Dawson, Tom Ranker, those kind of guys, and then Mike Kesey started going out there a lot. And you would just sit on the logs there and wait and hope they would say, we need a guy, jump in here.
Right.
So you'd get there early, you would get your shots up, and then when the old guys play, you would watch them, and eventually you would get in those games. And when you got in those games, you had to hold your own, or you weren't getting in a game for a while.
York County, like so many areas on Main Street America, became one of those places where there were places to go. Shelley Park was one of them, but you had Penn Park, which was a pretty tough place to play in those days. You had other places that you played around York County. Today it's like Spring and Sperry, I guess. You can go to other places. Right. Not as much outside as now you're going inside a little bit more. Talk about that and how that, maybe not unique to York County, but something that we think about, especially for a certain age.
Well, the outside courts in York County back in the day, that's what it was all about. I did play at Penn Park. I actually grew up for my first 6, 7 years on Cleveland Avenue, right up from
Right.
Penn Park. And I was really little to go down there. But I've also played in some summer tournaments down there as I was growing up, like in high school and things like that. And especially in college, I played down there. There was another park that we played at every now and then, Lincoln Park along
yeah.
Roosevelt Avenue. We would go over and play in that park. So I was sort of designated to play at those parks, mostly Shelley Park.
So you go on and you play, and you become pretty good. You get a little bit of a name. You play at West York. You have a pretty good career. Talk about that and how that kind of started to enrich this whole love of basketball and move you on up the line a little bit.
Well, when I played at West York, I played for some really good coaches. Maynard Prawl was my 8th grade coach. Tom Savage, 9th grade coach. John Eister was my 10th grade JV coach.
Right.
And Darwin Butler was my high school coach.
Some legends.
Really good guys that treated me very well, encouraged me. I wasn't always a starter in 8th and 9th grade, but I worked my way into the starting lineup. But I thought those guys gave me the encouragement. And also, Coach Eister came to me one time. He goes, "You're going to college, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to go to college." He says, "Well, why don't you be a coach when you get out of college?" And my brother said that to me too, but Coach Eister and Coach Bupp definitely said that to me. So when they said that to me when I was in high school, I started a notebook of some of our practices. I would write stuff down that we did in practice in 11th, 12th grade, and especially in college when I played for Jim Christopher and Dick Taylor at Lock Haven. So when I got out of school, I had that little notebook that I thought was very important.
I remember those kind of days. I didn't do it as a player, but when I used to go to Pocono Mountain Basketball Camp up in the Poconos, obviously, you had Harry Litwack ran that camp with Bill Foster. And what they do is they bring these guys in. So you might have Mike Krzyzewski coming in and teaching for an hour, and then you do the drills for an hour. I came home with notebooks full. I go like 13 weeks of these things. Bobby Knight would come in, and you're sitting on the front porch with Petey Carrill talk about the Princeton offense. And I used to write down all these notes. I come home and pile them up, and I go home and try them out and see what fit my philosophy, what didn't. Right. All these people that you get around and you work with. You talk about Mike Kesey, growing up with Mike Kesey as a coach. Him coming to my camp, we're talking about. He said, "Here's why you switch on defense. Here's why you do it." And sitting down talking about ideas. So really big thing about keeping a notebook at that particular time and then trying those ideas out in addition to what you were doing.
Yeah, I thought it was very important. When I coached at Shippensburg for a couple of years as an assistant at the university, I kept another notebook of all the offensive sets at every team I scouted. Out of bounds plays, half court offense against zone, things like that, just so I had a big collection of knowledge and research that I could refer to.
Yeah, piling that stuff up over the years. I looked back the other day, I was cleaning my garage out, and I had like a stack like this of all these different notes you'd taken over the years. And you think, holy smoke. But when you boiled it down, how did you get down to a philosophy then as you became a coach? And you started to think about, okay, here's what's working, here's what's not. You've seen all these different people use it. Your brother used it. You say, well, that was good, but I don't know if that fits me. How did you do that? How did you separate all that out?
Well, I think when you first start, you have all kinds of things sort of running right at you, and then you sort of, you try some things. That's not working, and I think you just have to be yourself and what you believe in, and over time that does unfold. And when you put a team together, some of the things that worked for the team last year might not work for the team this year. So you have to be able to have a wide variety of things that you can maybe go to. I didn't try to fit my players into my system. I tried to navigate my system to maybe fit the players' talents.
As you look at Warren Goodling, the coach, if you have a chance now to sit at the 30,000-foot level and you look down at that guy that started in 7th and 8th grade and then worked his way up, became the head coach at Northeastern, head coach at Hempfield, we had a great program there for a lot of years, number one, a whole lot of years, not only in the district but in the state, in the conversation a lot. Who was Warren Goodling, the coach? What were the best attributes you brought to the team as a coach of that team?
Well, when I interviewed at Hempfield, I made a statement. They asked me what kind, sort of the same question, and I said I want to be the type of coach that I want my son to play for, and that's sort of how I felt. I also wanted to, in the student body, I wanted to coach the student body in class, but I wanted to teach my players in basketball. You understand that?
Yeah.
So I think you needed to make a connection with everybody in the school, not just your basketball players, but the student body. But so if you coach the student body in class and teach your basketball players in basketball practice, I think you had a pretty good thing going, and that's what I sort of tried to do.
When you coached them in class, what kind of things were you doing in terms of coaching them in class? I'm interested in that.
Well, I think it comes down to individual attention, individual instruction, maybe getting to know them a little bit, and encouraging them, and trying to get a little bit more out of them, but also develop a little bit of a rapport that they're comfortable talking to you. So, sometimes you don't have to talk about the main subject all the time.
Right.
You have to let them know that, I caught a pretty big trout on Saturday. You wouldn't believe what happened in that story. I fell in chasing this thing downstream. Just things like that to break the ice, I think, helps relax everybody.
Your fishing has been notorious in your years of coaching, because I know there have been times where you and I have come across each other and you said, I was sitting on the stream the other week talking with this guy. It usually started something like that. It reminded me of the days with John Eister. It's one of the things you took from John Eister that he was really good at, that you took something that wasn't necessarily about what you were doing in the moment, but eventually came around to that through that particular seemingly unaffiliated kind of thing. Is that something you just kind of developed, or just something part of who you are?
Well, I spent a lot of time fly fishing out in the stream, and lots of times you are not just casting the rod all the time. So fly fishing to me has always been problem solving and observation. You had to put those two things together. Now, you have to have a little skill in putting the fly where you want it,
right?
But you have to problem solve all the time, and you have to observe what's going on. And sometimes I'd just sit on a rock and do that, and all of a sudden I'd be thinking about the basketball play that didn't work right last year, what we can do to make that work better, or how many more reps we have to do. So sometimes things like that crossed your mind when you're out there totally relaxed, not worrying about anything, and sometimes things came across your mind like that.
Fishing never took with me. My dad was a great fisherman, as you well know, but one of the things he told me one time, and I was thinking about it as you were just talking about fishing and then relating to other things, he said, sometimes kids don't hear me when I'm sitting behind my desk as a principal, but when I'm sitting on a stream, they hear me.
Right.
And I think, that's kind of a good analogy that you make there, that sometimes you're trying to solve some other problems, and maybe you can do them better in a different venue than what you were trying to do as kind of a normal status quo thing.
Exactly. One of the fun things I did at Hempfield was I got a grant from the Future Fisherman Foundation for fly fishing. So I got about $20,000 for the school, and I was able to develop a fly fishing class. Unfortunately, I couldn't take 30 students at a time in that. I could take 8 students at a time. And when I had signups for it, it just went like crazy. And my basketball players would come to me, hey, coach, can you get this person in class? They really need in there. Right. So I would try to get everybody in class over a period of time. And we actually took them fishing. We had a pond behind the school we stocked with trout. So we took them fishing, and we took some field trips. We took a bus up to the Yellow Breeches. We went to Donegal Springs. But I took my basketball players fishing a couple times, too, just for a team-building activity.
Yeah, those kind of things are so important, and people don't see those. They see the game. They see the score. They see what happened that night, but they don't see all the stuff that goes into that. Did you ever sit back after a big win or after a championship, and you sat and you said, I wish everybody could have experienced this, or everybody could have seen it? I know we won the state championship in 1987, and the very first thought I had, it's the strangest thing. I don't think I've ever said this to anybody but you, and I'm saying it right now. That the first thing I did, I looked around and said, I wish everybody could have this moment. But then what flashed before me was this movie of the macadam courts in the summer. You were at a lot of our leagues, being out there and working out during the day, seeing kids going through the tears of one moment and the joy of another moment. All those things kind of go in a big movie right in front of your eyes. I know you've had that experience a lot over the years.
Yeah, especially lots of times during the season, when you have a big win during the season, you really want to enjoy it, but you really can't because you have a game around the corner. Like, for example, your state championship game, that was the last game. There was no other game to play other than that one. Right. So you could really probably reflect on that. But in the course of the season, and even if you win a playoff game, you have another one coming, you're still sometimes looking ahead. So I think at the last game, that state championship game for you, that was the perfect time to let all those things happen. Yeah,
but you're right. You're always getting prepared. You're not thinking about anything else. Talk about that when you're preparing to run. You've gone down the stretch. We start the state championship games. as we're doing this right now, we're playing the state championship games up at the Giants Center this week, and it's always a special time of the year. But when you're preparing, a lot of people think, well, you're soaking in all the stuff that's going on outside and the social media and stuff. I don't remember ever doing that. I remember just being totally focused on one thing. How did you focus on that? How did you bear in with your kids? And what kind of things you do when you were in a run to the state championship or to a district championship kind of situation?
Well, it all starts like in the preseason. Like I used to make a list of what I called the dirty dozen for offense and the dirty dozen for defense. 12 things that I think that we're definitely going to see throughout the season, knowing some of the people that we're going to play. So you think about some of the best things that your opponents do, and you put it in your dirty dozen defense, dirty dozen offense. So it started way back. Like one year I went out and said, we will not give up this shot on an out-of-bounds play all season. If you give up this shot, you're subbing out. We're getting somebody in for you. So we drilled on what I called the league play. The inbounder throws the ball in, steps in, they reverse the ball, then he gets a down screen, goes to the corner, makes a shot, right?
Right.
Everybody in the league runs that play.
Yep.
I said the first day of practice, we are not giving this play up all year long. And my last year at Hempfield, we didn't give it up one time because we talked about it, we drilled on it all the time. But it starts then. But when you play a game, you're always looking to focus just on that game. And then when you play that game, you approach that game like every game that you approach. If you play the best team in the league, you approach it like when you played maybe the team that was on the bottom.
Right.
So you don't want to change anything on your preparation. If you're playing a team that's the bottom of the standings and you don't give that game as much as attention as you do some of the great games that you're going to play, your kids, they know that, and they might not have the same focus.
When you look at how the game has changed over the years, we talk about 1975 till now 2025, what are the biggest changes? Has the game changed all that much? I mean, obviously the three's been added, and that's been maybe the biggest thing. But outside of that, has the game changed a whole lot for you?
I think when you watch the game, there's maybe a little bit more emphasis on using the dribble to get into the paint. Because when you get the dribble into the paint, a lot of bad things happen for your defense.
Right.
You kick it out to the three. You can dump it down to the big guy. You get fouled. You can get a mid-range shot. But when the ball gets in the paint, I think there's more emphasis of trying to get the ball in the paint. And remember back in the old days where everybody wanted to help on the dribble, on the strong side. If you were guarding a guy in the wing and a guy went down by you, you would help off the guy
Right.
because there was no three-point line. That's sort of the worst play in basketball now, when you help off the strong side dribble, go in and your guy hits a three. So there's a lot of different little things that have changed with the basketball.
I think one of the biggest changes, I know when I was coaching way back when, that everything was screened away from the ball. You passed,
Right.
you cut, you screened away from the ball, and then you'd shape up off the screen.
Yeah.
Now it's screening on the ball, which is screen's a difficult thing to deal with anyway, but now screening on the ball, which goes kind of hand in hand with what you're talking about. The idea of a guy going around the corner, and now one of the things you're seeing in March Madness this year is this idea of going around the corner and toss it up for your 6'10" guy to go dunk it on a pick and dunk. It's not a pick and roll anymore, it's a pick and dunk.
Yeah.
You watch a lot of those kind of things if you have those kind of players. Now, I used to sit at some of the clinics and I'd say, well, I don't have that 6'10" guy, I got a 5'10" guy. What do I do with him? But still, the idea was that you screen on the ball more, you're getting into defense a lot more, and now with the three, you're able to kick out weak side and all those kind of things. So it is a lot different that way.
Yeah, it's interesting to people say, do you watch the NBA? Well, they are the best players. And I do watch the NBA a little bit. Not a whole lot, but I do watch. I'm always intrigued by the pick. It's going to be a pick and roll, obviously.
Right.
But it's the way you get into the pick and roll. Then you can watch them defend the pick and roll. A lot of different strategies on that.
So one of the things about being a coach for you is you've also been a player. You don't just talk to your kids about it. You can say, hey, here's how you do it. Here's what I want you to do. You play to this day. You're 72 now, and you're still playing. A lot of people say you're running as well as you always did. I don't know if you're as fast as you always were, but you were always really fast. You designed some of the wildest games as a coach that I've ever seen. And you talk about playing the game. One of the great things about basketball, you can play it one by yourself. You can play 2-on-2. You can play against the clock. You can play against yourself. You can make up games. Your imagination goes wild. You can have all kinds of fun with this. It's one of the great ways of really communicating, not just with yourself, but with other people when you get together and play. Talk about, playing today. You're playing on international, national teams. You've been on international champions. That's something that's really unusual. And in that degree, you're on a whole nother level.
Well, I do play on a team called USA Global.
Yes.
And we play here in the United States, and we also play international basketball. So with that group, I played in Portugal, I played in Finland, I played in Argentina, I played in Mexico, and this summer we're going to play in Switzerland. And I played on the 65 and older for a couple of years. Now, 6 of us have now just moved up to the 70s. So we'll play in the 70s. But that team is comprised of guys from all over the country, and it's just a great group of guys that at 72 years old and 70 years old, we have no drama on our team. We all play together. We hang out after the games. It's a pretty unique friendship.
So what's the quality of the basketball? Because I know you still work out. You worked out today before you came here,
Yeah.
and your workouts are intense. Tell people a little bit about what goes through a Warren Goodling workout during the day.
Well, I just get out there with the basketball and try to get a lot of shots up. And I try, this morning I did a full court workout where I would dribble from one end to another after I took a shot. I have to make sets of 10. And then every time I take a shot, I have to dribble to the other end. And then in between, when I make 10 shots, I have to shoot 3 foul shots. I have to make 3 foul shots in a row before I go to the next drill. So the time to work out, I have 10 sets of 10. I'm going to make 100 jump shots, finish up with 10 full court layups. And then I have to make 15 foul shots in a row before I leave the gym.
Wow.
So today, it was all good. I got it on my first try. Sometimes it takes me more than one try. But the fun I have is playing with guys locally. I play with James Brooks and Brad Markey and some of my former players like Bobby Young, Jason Sarball. I still play with them. I just got a call from Kevin Blackhurst last night to come over to Centerville to play 2-on-2 with some guys, full court to 100. So that's the whole fun part right there.
Well, the Warren Goodling game is 2-on-2 to 100, no inbounds, right? You just go.
The ball goes through the net. You don't have to take it out. You just go.
That's exactly right.
Okay. 3-on-3, 1-on-1. And that just makes it more fun. And you have to dribble across half court. You can't throw a cherry pick lob pass.
Yeah, you got to play it the right way.
Right.
I mean, there's rules here.
Exactly.
And now you're an analyst. You get to do some state championship games. And, how do you look at that? It's a little bit different kind of way of doing things. But, it's fun sitting up there, isn't it?
Yeah. Dale Jackson from LL Hoops got me involved a number of years ago to be the color analyst for the LL Hoops. And I look at it like I'm scouting the game. Okay, this is what they're doing. This is what they're trying to do. But then you start looking a little bit deeper on knowing what the game means, the emotions of the game, what the coach is thinking. Usually the play-by-play goes, well, Coach, what's he telling him at that timeout? I wish I knew sometimes, but you could take a guess on that one.
Yeah, you really do. Warren, you've been so good for the game over all the years as a player, as a coach, as an analyst, as a friend, as a guy who's just willing to have a conversation with people on the way and educating kids, helping them be better. That's something to look back on and be really happy about. Final thoughts?
Just been very fortunate. My mother and father encouraged me to go down to the park and play basketball and supported me and all those things. My brother was a big influence. My sister's been maybe the biggest fans. But I've been really fortunate to be involved with a lot of great people that I've learned a lot from and I have a lot of great friendships from.
And every day is a new day in the sun, right?
Absolutely.
Warren Goodling, one of the great voices on Main Street. He's been great as an educator. He's still great as a player. He's doing a super job as an analyst. And above all that, he's just a great friend. Warren Goodling here today. I'm Gary Sutton with Just a Voice on Main Street. Check me out every day on WOYK, 6 to 9 each morning. Don't forget 989 WOYK or 98.9 FM, 1350 AM on WOYK.